It started raining just after midnight, not the gentle kind, the kind that drums on glass like a warning. I was standing on the roof of the Helix building, 51 floors up, watching a skyline lit by my betrayal. Below me, warm light spilled from the ballroom, where Zafer's board toasted our IPO with $1,000 champagne and a jazz quartet on retainer. Through the windows, I could see them all, laughing, slapping backs, faking humility for the investors. I wasn't invited. I co-founded the company, built its foundation, but I wasn't invited. My name is Lucas Rane. I'm 34 years old. 2 months ago, I was the chief architect and head of systems innovation at Zafer Technologies. The press called me a visionary, a recluse, a genius with an edge. The board called me a liability. Not to my face, of course. Never directly. They used lawyers for that. I remember the meeting like it was a software update. Cold, controlled, finished before I could ask the first question. A long glass table. Too many suits. A security badge deactivated as I sat down. "Lucas," Karen Lee said, the acting chair, "this isn't personal." She handed me a separation folder thick enough to have its own pulse. Across the table, Darren Helms, the new golden boy, sat with a smile carved from politics. "The vision is bigger than any one person," he offered, like that somehow smoothed the blade. I didn't argue. Arguing meant you still believed. I just stood, left the folder on the table, and walked out without shaking a single hand. The air outside was colder than I remembered. They thought I'd walk away. They thought they'd locked me out, revoked my credentials, wiped my permissions, cut me off at the knees. But they forgot one thing. I built the damn skeleton. They painted the face. I laid the nerve endings, the heartbeat, the code that stitched Zafer into every system it touched. The algorithm was mine. Babel. It didn't start as a product. It started as grief therapy. My younger brother bled out in a parking lot because a hospital algorithm marked him non-priority after a crash. Wrong demographic, wrong zip code. He was 21. A kid with a broken clavicle and too much blood on the concrete. I built Babel to make sure that never happened again. At least, that's what I told myself. Then the funding came. The acceleration, the patents, the adoption curve, hospitals, shipping, aviation, banking. Babel didn't just enter the infrastructure, it became it. And then, they sold me out. Offered me a buyout, asked me to sign an NDA. Said they'd name a research wing after me, like I was already dead. But I wasn't. And I never leave a door unlocked, unless I want someone to walk through it. Failsafe. 2 years ago, during a firmware update cycle, I embedded a shadow protocol deep inside Babel's root logic. It wasn't malicious, not a virus, not ransomware, just gravity. One click, and the whole machine folds in on itself. Silent. Fast. Absolute. A heart attack dressed as a hiccup. I never meant to use it. It was insurance. Proof that the code still belonged to me, even if the paper trail didn't. Until tonight. I watched through the rooftop glass as Darren raised his flute. The lights behind him sparkled like a city trying to wink at me. "To innovation," I heard him say, his voice faint through the wind. "And to the people who make it possible." Laughter. Glass clinks. A chorus of suits celebrating the product of a man they buried with legalese. I turned from the edge, walked back through the service door, down the stairwell. No cameras, no trace. My loft is 7 blocks away, top floor, no neighbors, just enough tech in the walls to make sure I know when someone breathes wrong, within 50 feet. I unlocked it by tapping 3 fingers to the deadbolt and 1 to the drywall sensor. The lights stayed off. I sat at the desk, old scratched maple, no biometric scanners, just a vintage IBM keyboard with its cable fed into a Faraday-shielded tower. Offline, always offline. I pulled up the shell window, typed 5 keys, then 6, then paused. This wasn't about revenge. Not exactly. This was about truth, ownership, control. I stared at the cursor blinking on the screen like it was daring me. One more keystroke and everything changes. My phone buzzed. Voicemail. No name. Just a robotic transcription. You had your shot. Don't make us clean this up. I smiled. Of course they knew I'd do something, but they didn't know when. That's the power of patience. I hit enter. No fireworks, no alarms, just a ripple, invisible to anyone not looking for it. In the Babel servers, a silent flag flipped to true. The outer logic began to rewrite itself. Subroutines failed quietly. API calls returned null. Within 10 minutes, Babel would be deaf and dumb across every node it touched. A digital aneurysm, internal, lethal, untraceable. They'd built an empire on my back. I just turned off the power. The light on the router went red at 12:09 a.m. That was the first domino. Not flashy, not dramatic. Just a soft blink that told me Babel had started to eat itself. I sat inside a 20-foot storage container, buried 3 stories beneath a disused rail yard south of the city. Modified interior, copper mesh lining every wall. No signal in, no signal out. The only feed came from a secure offline server racked beside me. My own ghost node, syncing with Babel's external behaviors using mirrored test environments I'd embedded years ago. They thought it was QA redundancy. It was actually a mirror, a copy. My own black box. One line of code triggered an avalanche. First to fall, logistics. Route coordination in Chicago froze at 12:11. Warehouse drones in Kansas City entered a recursive loop and began delivering packages to each other in an infinite cycle. The Babel API rejected all traffic flow commands. Semis lined up on I-80 like parked dominoes. Hospitals came next. Emergency routing stalled. Diagnostic tools failed to read vitals. By 12:23, a mid-sized cardiac unit in Tucson reported system failure. A man coded and didn't make it. I knew because I was watching the mirrored logs live. Packet drop timestamps, red line error flags blinking across the screen like digital blood. I leaned back. Let it wash over me. This wasn't chaos. It was order unmade, controlled entropy. Every strand of code Babel ever touched was now folding inward, devouring the logic that once made it perfect. And it was perfect. Once. I built Babel in a grief coma. My brother's name was Jonah. He was 21, couldn't afford his own insurance, and ended up in a system that sorted him below priority, based on a predictive risk model, one that factored his address, income bracket, and family history. He had an inflamed appendix. The model decided it could wait. It couldn't. It ruptured while he was in the ER waiting room. Internal bleed, sepsis. 3 hours of ignoring him. 9 minutes of failed surgery. Pronounced dead at 2:43 a.m. That was the night I stopped believing in algorithms written by people who never had to use them. I wanted to build something better, something fair, something blind to bias, to wealth, to politics, something that just worked. So I wrote Babel. I didn't sleep for 6 months, barely 8. I coded until my hands went numb and my eyes screamed. And when I finally ran Babel in a closed loop, it was beautiful. Seamless optimization, clean parsing, self-correcting syntax trees, machine logic refined enough to rewrite itself faster than any dev team ever could. But then Zephyr happened. The funding, the board, the slow cancer of ambition. They repurposed Babel into profit. It stopped being a guardian. It became a gatekeeper. One deal at a time, it traded ethics for efficiency. And I let it happen. I didn't pull the plug. Not then. Now I had. I watched as more red blocks stacked on the monitor. Hong Kong's smart transit collapsed at 12:30. Two major banks locked clients out of online accounts across Europe at 12:32. Emergency communications in a satellite-linked supply chain system went silent at 12:34. Across the globe, Babel was collapsing like lungs giving out underwater. My phone vibrated. Only one number could reach it. Her. Talia. I hesitated, then answered. Lucas? She breathed, panic in her voice. Tell me this isn't you. Which part? Don't. She caught herself. A hospital in Montreal lost its network. The NICU went dark. They switched to backup power, but a baby flatlined. Lucas, a baby died. I closed my eyes. I didn't shut off power, Talia. I shut off control. You know that's bullshit. Silence stretched. I told you, I said quietly. When you left, I told you they'd turn Babel into something I'd have to kill. You think this makes you the hero? You think this, what? This brings Jonah back? No, I said. But it keeps them from making 20 more Jonahs. She said nothing, just breathing. Then she hung up. I didn't blame her. I sat back in the chair, watching the collapse continue, watching my work undo itself. But I felt it deep down, an ache that didn't feel like victory, the silence after impact. The system lights flickered again. New ping. Zephyrs' internal network had gone dark. Their incident response protocol triggered. And beneath that, deep in the packet stream, a spike. FBI, Cyber Division, a silent pull request probing for anomalies in federal contract dependencies. Too quiet for media, too loud to ignore. Then came the second ping. Foreign signature. Tier 1 trace obfuscated through 6 countries. Not federal. Private. Black ops firm, likely one of Zephar's investor contingencies. Ghost units trained to put out digital fires by silencing the source. Me. It had begun. They weren't calling it a glitch anymore. They were calling it war. The burn phone started vibrating at 2:14 a.m. I was beneath a laundromat on the east side, concrete floors, mold on the support beams, and a single cot wedged between 2 server racks, humming at a frequency only I seemed to hear. I'd just finished scrubbing the last trace of my previous identity. SIMs crushed, cache torched, biometrics sliced from every camera within a mile radius. But I must have missed something. Always a ghost in the code. The screen lit up. Unknown. Video call. I let it ring once, then twice. Then answered with the front camera blocked. The face that filled the screen made my hands go still. Darren Helms, CEO, my replacement, my executioner. He was wearing a tailored suit, but I could tell from the background he was sitting in a mobile operations van. No echo, no glare. Close quarters. That meant they were nearby. Turn it off, Lucas, he said, voice smooth as a sharpened stone. Or we turn you off. I didn't respond. He smiled like it was a negotiation. You made your point. Beautiful chaos, really. But let's be honest. We both know you didn't think it through. Hospitals, airports, pensions. You killed people. You. Not Zephyr. Not Babel. Just you and your little tantrum. I held up the phone, flipped the camera around, and showed him my middle finger. Then I ended the call. I wasn't staying in that safe house another minute. Within 60 seconds, I had the gear packed. 3 burners, cold storage wallet, backup drive, no trace, no second chances. I lifted the hidden floor hatch and dropped into the crawl space, dragging the duffel behind me. Above me, I heard the faint click of rotors. They had a drone. No way Helms called me from the van, unless he was close. It wasn't about intimidation. It was about delay, buying time while someone closed the net. I emerged 2 blocks away through a maintenance tunnel and pulled on a city worker's vest I'd stuffed inside a hollow meter box weeks earlier. The street was quiet, but too quiet. Cameras pivoted with too much curiosity. I kept moving. Every few steps, my mind flashed back, not to the present, but to where all this started. MIT, age 19, quantum processing minor, cyber system specialization. I was the kid who cracked his professor's research server in 3 hours, then wrote a cleaner version of the algorithm before class ended. That professor sent my name to a DARPA contact. They invited me to a summer program in DC. It wasn't a summer program. It was Signals Intelligence Deep Dive. Military-grade training cloaked as academic study. Encryption, intercepts, offensive protocol development. Psychological warfare through code. I learned how to take down a nation's infrastructure using a laptop and a cigarette lighter. I also learned that trust was a luxury. Every handshake came with terms. Every compliment was a leash. My first startup, called Vane, was built with a mentor I admired. He took my code, my pitch deck, my life's work, and sold it before the ink dried on our incorporation papers. Left me out of the deal, changed the passwords, gave me a $10,000 courtesy exit. My parents told me I should have been more careful, that it was a lesson in humility. Jonah was the only one who sided with me, said we'd build something better, something unstoppable. Then he died, and I did exactly what he said. Babel wasn't supposed to become this. I coded it to protect people, to outthink greed. I gave it morality, or tried to. But somewhere along the line, I started to believe that if the world didn't recognize what I built, I'd burn it down, just to make them see it. And now? Now they were hunting me like a rogue weapon, because I was. I reached the old metro line and jumped the turnstile, cutting across the tunnel on foot. I had a destination, the Rift. That's what I called it, a project that never launched. An unfinished data farm carved into bedrock 80 miles west of the city. It was meant to be Babel's final evolution, a decentralized node grid immune to central tampering. When Zephyr pulled funding, I kept the shell. I never deleted the schematics, never lost the entry codes. I knew one day I'd need a place they couldn't follow, a place Babel could be reborn, or buried. I emerged on the other side of the tunnel, clothes soaked in sweat, heart calm, like a gun chamber. Bought a junker off a guy in a truck stop lot for cash, and no questions. By sunrise, I was past the city perimeter, nothing but cracked asphalt behind me. They thought they could corner me with drones and heat maps and biometric traps. But I wasn't just some rogue dev with a grudge. I was trained to disappear before I ever learned to code. They were chasing a man, but I was already a protocol. I didn't just build the bomb. I built the bunker too. The server farm was still here, half buried in red dirt and broken concrete, a scar on the landscape that never healed. No power grid, no fences, just the hollow bones of a project Zephyr abandoned when the board got cold feet. I stood in the doorway of the main data hall, wind pushing sand through steel frames, cables like veins dangling from the ceiling. To anyone else, it looked dead. But I knew better. Beneath the floor, under a false panel I welded myself 3 years ago, was a cold node. Isolated, disconnected, a dormant clone of Babel's earliest self, the last uncorrupted version, before licensing deals, before politics, before they stripped it down and rewrote its soul. I slid the panel back, knelt, and keyed in the boot sequence. 3 tones, 1 pause, a 4th tone. The machine came to life with a hum that felt like breath. I sat at the terminal, wiped the dust from the keyboard, and began the upload. The truth release. Every contract Babel processed where human oversight was overridden and buried in algorithmic discretion. every payout made to silence whistleblowers, every redirected medical supply shipment that favored stockholders over ERs, every name, every death, every dollar. This wasn't sabotage. This was confession. I encrypted the package, layered it across mirrored servers embedded in dead websites, distributed through onion-rooted relays I'd written back in DARPA. The detonation protocol was simple. One trigger file, uploaded to the chain, would broadcast the data across 10,000 dormant RSS feeds and archive sites. Unstoppable. Indelible. I set the countdown, 12 hours. Then, I checked my watch. They were coming. I knew it before I saw the drone feed flicker to life on my tablet. Thermal hits crossing the ridge a mile out. 6 men, maybe 7, full tactical loadouts, suppressed rifles, shoulder beacons running low IR patterns. Someone paid a lot for silence. They didn't want to reclaim Babel. They wanted to erase it, and me with it. I smiled. Fine. I laced the hallways with pressure pads calibrated just below the weight of a desert hare. I rerouted thermal dampeners into scrap pipes laid along the north corridor, false trails. I reprogrammed a drone to loop decoy audio in 30-second bursts and wired the central entry hall with a flashbang trap disguised as a solar inverter. And then I waited. The first breach came through the utility corridor. A sharp, clean blow to the panel. 2 entered, moving in tandem. I dropped the first before his foot cleared the doorway. The second ducked behind a panel and returned fire. But I'd already ghosted to the side passage. They weren't amateurs. They moved with discipline, but they didn't know the layout. I did. Every shadow, every misstep. By the time I reached the main conduit tunnel, 2 more were down. 1 blinded by the flashbang, 1 tangled in the tripwire and screaming for help. The last 3 split up. Bad idea. I found 1 flanking the north stairwell. I didn't shoot him. I shocked him with a rigged capacitor panel and zip-tied his hands behind his back before he hit the floor. Then I pulled off his mask. My breath caught. It was Caleb, my old CTO, co-architect of Babel. The guy who helped me write its original logic tree on a chalkboard at 2 a.m. after too many Red Bulls and grief dreams. He blinked through the stun, eyes wet and furious. "You always had to be the hero," he said through clenched teeth. "You're wearing a kill team patch, Caleb. You set Babel on fire." "No," I said. "You watched them poison it and said nothing. I built that system with you. And then you let them turn it into a coffin factory." He looked away. I knelt beside him. "There's a data package uploading right now. Full dump, everything. Every secret they buried inside Babel, every contract you signed. You're in there too." His eyes met mine again. This time, there was no anger, just fear. "You won't make it out," he said. "I don't plan to." I left him tied up in the stairwell, 1 knife within arm's reach. He could make his choice. I'd made mine. Back at the terminal, the upload bar passed 82%. My fingers hovered over the keys. The last stage required final confirmation. Execute truth trigger. I typed it in, confirmed. 12 hours to daylight. 12 hours to revelation. If they reached me before then, they could kill the messenger. But not the message. I looked around the ruin of what should have been a sanctuary and realized it had become something more. A grave for Babel. A cradle for the truth. I checked the chamber on my sidearm, loaded, primed. Then I leaned back in the chair, heart slow, hands still. If I die tonight, I die unedited. They came at dawn. The first breach hit the southeast wall. Tactical-shaped charge, not subtle. Concrete blew inward in a plume of dust and rebar. I didn't flinch. I was already in position, crouched behind a reinforced rack of legacy server blades that I never fully installed. Triggers armed, fail-safes waiting. The countdown had 2 minutes left. Shadows moved through the smoke. Black-clad suppressed weapons up, lasers tight to chests. 7 men, maybe 8. Drones above, buzzing like flies over something about to die. The rift lit up with red dots on my thermal display. They thought they were the ones hunting. They didn't realize I'd turned the entire facility into a maze of misfires and mirrored signals. First step, first spark. One tripped a copper wire I'd routed through the battery cage. Set off a flash pulse, dazzled their optics. That bought me 10 seconds. I popped up and fired once. One of them dropped before his team even found cover. The others scattered. Shots cracked through the racks, shattering plastic, glancing off steel. I felt one graze my arm. Another tagged my shoulder. Clean through, high enough not to matter yet. Pain flared. I bit down on it. I hit the first failsafe. Emergency backup power flipped to reverse flow, overloading the grid in Section C. Lights burst. Circuit boards sizzled. Sparks rained down on their helmets like judgment. They pushed deeper anyway. Smart, suicidal, paid well. I ducked low, bleeding down my side, and crawled to the final terminal, my last line of command. The upload bar read 97%. Buffering slowed under bandwidth stress. The dead man's switch pulsed green in the corner. One of them rounded the corner too fast. Saw me. Raised his rifle. I didn't hesitate. I fired through the server stack. He dropped hard, his body collapsing into a tangle of cables. 98%. Another drone whirred in above me, but I'd jammed the frequency loop hours ago. It hovered, confused, before colliding with the crossbeam. Sparks, metal scream, smoke, 99%. I sat down, blood soaking into my shirt. Breathing hurt now. Everything felt far away, but sharp at the same time. Adrenaline, or maybe memory. The last man came in slow, methodical, masked, rifle steady. I didn't reach for mine. I just looked at him. He paused. I nodded at the screen behind me. 100%. Upload complete. Then the lights went out. Every screen in the world blinked. Hospitals, banks, government offices, coffee shops, traffic signs. Anything Babel had ever touched. Everything it was. For 2 full seconds the world stuttered. Then the data came. Documents, emails, signed contracts, payoffs, death certificates, internal memos, time-stamped executions masked as policy, shell companies, political names, body counts. Babel hadn't just automated infrastructure, it had weaponized indifference. Now, the whole world could see it. The man facing me looked down at his wrist. Some signal must have come through. He turned, bolted. He didn't fire a shot. I leaned back against the wall and exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. Then, everything went quiet. The news broke before sunrise. Zephyr stock froze. Regulatory watchdogs opened emergency probes. 2 senators resigned within the first hour. Arrests followed. Footage leaked of boardroom raids. Karen Lee was handcuffed in her townhouse. Darren Helms vanished, and on every screen where Babel once sat in silence, there was now a name. Truth Initiative Release Protocol, Ghost. Below it, smaller. Signature, Lucas Run. But no one could find me, because I wasn't anywhere. Now I sit by the ocean, a coastal shack with rotting wood and windows I haven't bothered to fix. My shoulders still taped. The stitches pull when I move wrong. It's quiet here. Not peaceful, just honest. The tide doesn't lie. It just comes and goes. A burner phone buzzes beside me. One text. They're offering you a deal. Immunity, consulting, money. I delete it. No response. No second thoughts. I'm not coming back. Not to Zephyr. Not to Babel. not to anything that smells like power, wrapped in promises. I didn't crash the system for revenge. I crashed it, so no one could rebuild it the same way again. And I left the blueprint for something better. Somewhere safe, somewhere silent.